You know, we're focusing the first part of Down the Road today on the news that came out of Washington, D.C., came out by Politico, that pointed out that there's an opinion that clearly has the majority of the Supreme Court on what could be a 5-4, could be a 6-3. Nobody's talking about that, but certainly it is at 5-4 that throws out Roe v. Wade. Which would make abortion illegal in any state that chooses to make it illegal. Now, some of you are going to say, well, good, states' rights. That's the way the Constitution was. We'll get to that a little bit later. You know, we'll talk about what you believe when it comes to states' rights and what you don't believe when it comes to states' rights. But what we're not going to avoid is a subject that's hard to talk about. And that is a word that no one uses unless you have to use, which is the word abortion. And that's just flat out on people's minds as it plays out. Now, Amy Jacobson is the executive director with Prairie Action, North Dakota, and she joins us right now. Amy, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Thanks, Joel.
Tell people what Prairie Action is.
Yeah, well, Prairie Action is a North Dakota-based communication and digital advocacy organization, and we focus on lifting up and amplifying progressive values in the state of North Dakota.
Okay, so you're out there telling a story that isn't always told.
That's true, right. But we know that a lot of people in North Dakota hold these values, so we want to be part of making sure that voice is part of the larger dialogue.
Okay, I get it. When word came out from you and your organization, what were you thinking? What were you saying when you found out that the Supreme Court is going to overturn Roe?
I mean, it's crazy how it's like both shocking, stunning, and at the same time not surprising at all. It's been a long time that, we've been talking about this sort of situation and preparing for a situation that could result if this draft brief is held up. But I think first and foremost, the most important thing I want to say right now is that right now abortion is still legal. So anybody who has an appointment or who needs to make an appointment should still do that. Right now, that is a protected right, and I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in the conversation because a lot of people who are seeking terminations are scared right now.
Okay. But the way it's going down, if it goes the way it's been reported by Politico,
yes,
that window's pretty close. It's very close to being closed. And so, that's probably why a lot of people are thinking about that. When you look at however, I mean, it's a huge number of pages, the Alito opinion that he's written, which quite frankly is, in my opinion, by design. It's a way of making sure you don't read through the whole thing. When you take a look at it, what do you see?
I just see a rollback of rights for all kinds of people buried within this draft. I think that this should be alarming, not just for folks who support reproductive rights, and we should be reminded that Roe v. Wade has been the rule of law for 50 years, a half a century, and to see such drastic steps back is alarming. And we know also that a lot of this is protected rights for our privacy, and this could have sweeping consequences beyond reproductive rights. We could be looking at court cases that protect contraception and access to contraception, or looking at court cases that protect LGBTQ and gay marriage. So this is a very bold and very scary statement that's being put forward.
I said before the break that for the purists that believe that the federal government should not be able to legislate to the states, that all of that is left to the states, that there's a lot of things in our life that were changed by the federal government because the states got it wrong. We have we have the ability for everyone to vote when roadblocks were being put in front of people to vote. Now that's changing. Mm-hmm. Now the states are within a position where they think they're in power so that they can go ahead and make it harder for minorities to vote. We had a situation where if it wasn't for the federal government, people would be enslaved. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are they're not drastic examples anymore based upon the ideology of what some of these states have.
Right. And human rights are not up for a vote. These are protected rights, and we're going to stand by them. We can't allow the minority rule to take away human rights from people. And that's from abortion. Abortion is healthcare, and healthcare is a human right. So that's where we stand on it.
Well, the court goes 6-3, conservative versus progressive. And when you look at a 6-3 majority, even if it's 5-4 and Judge Roberts, which has kind of been a swing vote, is now in the minority, it makes me take a look back at what they said, what they did to get on that court. Obviously, Mitch McConnell got what he wanted, and he hypocrisized himself. He just flat out lied. Yeah. I could say hypocrisized all I want. He wouldn't give Merrick Garland even a hearing, and yet he let Comey Barrett just rushed her through within weeks based upon the timing of an election. So I get that. I get the game, if it will be, that's played. But these are going to be the rules now. Yes. This is going to be the court now. So how do you react to that? Because anything that goes to them, they're only going to go through this once, this debate, this vote. I mean, that means in my lifetime, the conservatives, the ultra-conservatives have won. Yeah,
it is terrifying when you think about what that means for people in North Dakota. I mean, we have a trigger ban already on the books. It was passed by the North Dakota legislature, I think 2007, so 15 years ago. That would hinge on something like this happening, because this has always been the ultimate goal of the far right. So in June, or if this draft becomes the actual ruling from the court, abortion is illegal in the state of North Dakota. The one abortion provider that we even have in our state has to close their doors, and people who need that health care no longer have access to it.
So let's do what you would say to them, little debate here. For those individuals that say, look, good, that abortion is killing that unborn baby, that's a human being, and if you so do that, you're committing murder. What's your answer to them?
Well, what I would say first and foremost is, we know historically that banning abortion and making abortion inaccessible does not stop abortions from happening. It stops safe abortions from happening, and we will see people die. And now that we have access to the internet and people can order drugs online, who knows how people will take this action into their own hands. So you are putting people in very dangerous positions by trying to prevent safe abortions from happening. That's first and foremost. I think secondly, every person's situation is completely unique, and that's why it's important when we think about these conversations about exceptions within bans. Now, we know that people do not support straight out abortion bans with no exceptions at all. I mean, that means in cases of rape and incest, that means when mothers' health and lives are at stake, and it can have a chilling effect, and we know that that's not what people support.
But that isn't what this opinion does.
Right.
I mean, this opinion doesn't protect that. This opinion could care less whether the rape, incest, the life and health of the mother, period.
Right.
That doesn't matter. You can have a complete abortion ban, and in those states, I was there in North Dakota when they ran this through. They don't care, whether
they
or not.
don't care, but the people do care. The voters in North Dakota do care, and we know in 2014 our voters had to vote on an abortion ban in North Dakota. It was called personhood, and it had no exceptions, and it had sweeping consequences, which any abortion ban will have, because it's a complicated issue at heart. But our voters in North Dakota turned out to vote, and they voted 2-1 to reject what the North Dakota State Legislature had done. They do not believe in such strident actions. And I believe that ultimately there will be electoral consequences that will happen when people are not on the side of the people, and people want safe, legal abortions so that women do not die.
So what does your group do? If this is where you're at, this is what you support. Yeah. You're in a tough spot. I mean, what does Prairie Action do to make that majority of North Dakotans' voice heard?
And that's what we're doing right now, is just trying to be a voice and let people know that they're not alone. Because oftentimes when you're in a rural community and a very vocal minority of people are a far right part of a political party, they dominate. We've been through this in our nation here with Donald Trump. They dominate the airwaves, they dominate the conversations, and they put people into places where they don't want to speak out just because they don't want to face harassment. And we want to connect with people and say, you're not alone in these communities. Like, we think like you think, and please come along. Like, pay attention, participate in the conversation. Here's toolkits that you can use to have conversations with your family. I know there'll be rallies coming up in North Dakota. There was pop-up ones last night in Fargo with great attendance. And I think it's just going to be a matter of like bringing people back together and standing back up against this and making sure that we're turning up to vote too.
All of my adult life, abortion's been legal.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about since the early 1970s. Yeah. Do you think that my daughters and soon to be their daughters took this for granted? Do you think that the passion that was brought out by the generation before you doesn't exist anymore?
I wouldn't say it doesn't exist, but I would say, so previous to my role here at Prairie Action, I worked for 15 years in abortion rights in North Dakota with Planned Parenthood. And I would be on college campuses, so this is, throughout the 2000s. And what you would hear oftentimes is just a reaction that a disbelief that Roe v. Wade or protection to the right to abortion or even access to contraception could ever be taken away. Like, it was just an intrinsic part of their life that they knew that they could get that care that if they needed it. But over the course of the last maybe 5 years or more, I would say especially in the younger demographic, people became much more concerned because we were seeing more actions.
They saw trouble coming.
We saw trouble coming. We saw, our employers being able to deny access to contraception and starting on that level. And so I think there's definitely levels of, I don't think anybody really believed we'd get to this day.
Yeah. Cecile Richards, I thought, put it very interesting when she said mentally she was ready for it, emotionally she wasn't.
Yes.
I thought that was a profound statement. Last words come from you.
I would just want to say that if there are people who are looking for ways to help, I would suggest that they make a gift to the North Dakota WIN Fund. It's the Women in Need Abortion Fund, and they help people who are pregnant who need to terminate pregnancies get to a clinic, especially if they have to travel a distance. So they're trying to grow their fund. So if and when North Dakota does go dark, people can travel to Minnesota to get their care. And that's at ndwinwinfund.org.